My background was in wildfire restoration, flood, hurricane cleanup, mold removal. So I would go to big disaster zones, make a sick home a healthy home so a family could come back. And the air was just as much a big part of making a building healthy and safe again. We would use machines called air scrubbers. I would compare that scrubber to these little air purifiers, and I'm like, wow, this is not apples to apples. Your indoor air is pretty bad because the greatest air filter in the world is nature. And our homes are built so tight that nature doesn't come inside. The outdoor CO2 is 400-ish. Indoor CO2 is usually about 600 to 800. People are breathing, there's less fresh air. At 1,000, that's when the brain fog starts kicking in. 1,500, 2,000, that's where you get serious fatigue. When you say it's stuffy inside, that's your translation for the carbon dioxide is too high. The NASA study in the 70s got pretty popular where they showed the effectiveness of removing particulates and VOCs in closed setting, and no one has ever been able to replicate that study. I've put plants into small rooms and monitored the CO2 and the air quality, and I've never been able to get it to change at all. From my opinion, I've never seen replicatable evidence that they work. We make Jaspers, we have a great air scrubber, but really the mission that we're on here is just increasing air awareness all across the board.
What is one thing in the air purifier industry you wish people knew, but brands aren't talking about?
Airflow. Airflow.
Okay. Give it to me.
Yeah, so, and you specifically said air purifier industry, so I'm going to answer that question specifically. Air purifier industry. So most of the products that you see, people are buying from a big retailer, not direct to consumer. They're buying it from Amazon, Walmart, Best Buy, Home Depot. And most of the machines you see there are in that $99 to $299 range. And they're made out of plastic and they're very small and they're made by huge companies that make thousands of things. And no one's really, very few companies are actually specializing in trying to create a great product. And the sad thing is, everybody nowadays thinks in Amazon filters. Not everything's a TV where it's like 65-inch, 75-inch, 4K, bang. With air purifiers, unfortunately, the way that they are ranking them and categorizing them is by square footage of coverage, which is the silliest thing ever because air doesn't even care about square footage. So I said airflow, but I would say the misconception and where people are getting it wrong is thinking about air and square footage instead of cubic volume. Because if you have an 8-foot ceiling versus a 16-foot ceiling, that's double the air, which would be half the effectiveness. So for brands to be making claims based on square footage is quite baseless. And they also don't tell you that usually that's assuming a very low, like a 7-foot ceiling. It's also assuming that the machine is running on full speed all the time. So it's very disheartening that people are making purchases thinking, and unlike temperature, people aren't as sensitive to air quality unless they train themselves to be as you are to temperature. So if you bought a little space heater and the room was still too cold, your thermal comfort would be off and like you'd be like, I need more heaters, I need a blanket, it's not working. With clean air, you get really used to surviving in dirty air. So I would say the biggest issue is the claims based on square footage and the tiny little machines that are not very effective, which is quite disappointing.
Okay, so what you're saying there, it's not about square footage of the home. You got to look at volume. It depends how high your ceilings are. And we want to look at total volume in a room or in the home.
Yeah, and I think there should be, unfortunately, there's no standard. Even when you hear companies say things like HEPA, that doesn't mean anything because there's no standards and regulations around the airflow. So, what would be a fair test would be to be HEPA, you should have to do a test at the actual speed that the fan blows. For example, when they do a HEPA certification, they take the filter out of the machine. And if you really look at a lot of companies' lab data, let's say the airflow is 100 CFM, 100. Here's my example. Imagine doing safety testing on cars, but they were allowed to test the cars crashing, driving 2 or 3 kilometers or miles an hour. You're like, yeah, everybody survived and the car was not impacted. But how is it reasonable to do a safety test at such a low speed? It should have to be at 40 kilometers, 80 kilometers, 120, 60 miles, and that should be disclosed. So the issue is there's no disclosure over the speed of the test. So everybody has the safest car in the world when you're crashing them at incredibly low speeds. And that is the way that most HEPAs and most air filters are graded and scored. There's no standard and there's no transparency around the speed of the air. So yeah, I've actually never thought of the speed of the vehicle analogy before, but it feels good.
That's a good one. Well, given what you just shared there, how do we know when brands are cutting corners?
It's very hard to know. It's very, very hard to know. And I mean, it comes to like education, whether you're talking about organic foods or supplements, everything at the end of the day comes down to trust. And I would say that's a hard one, right? Because a lot of people, I mean, it's losing trust consistently, but like getting your information from a CNET reviews article that has the best three products ranked, all of those companies are just really like big affiliate businesses. Um, and there's not much alignment there. There's not much testing there. But the real truth is firsthand testimonials and reviews are the best. So like if a friend drives a vehicle or recommends a restaurant, that's going to carry a lot more weight than me than reading a blog. So it's the trust of the recommender, and then understand like if someone vouches and tells me to trust someone in business, that's a great guy. I'm like, how long have you known them? And you're like, we met last month. I'm like, well, the duration of the relationship matters. And the experiences you've had together matters. And this is no different than any other type of trust. So the best trust ever is going to always be word of mouth. And then companies that have really strong and flexible return policies are great. The thing with air is it should be undeniable. So if someone's wondering, I don't know if my air purifier is working, chances are it's not working at all. And certain things you don't really need to trust it because there's an objective truth. For example, is my sauna working? Is my cold plunge working? It's undeniable. How you feel is going to give you all the feedback you need. All you're going to want is something that's reliable and doesn't break. So you're hoping for a good warranty, a good company, and some trusted referrals. To me, those are the big things. So for us, like for example, we gave 150 people Jaspers last year in exchange for 1 month of sleep data because every third party lab that we went to, the first guy you speak to at these labs is saying, what claims are you trying to make? So we can reverse engineer a study to help you make your claims. And I'm like, I don't want to do business with you anymore because this sucks because they're in the social proof business. So if they didn't give every brand A++, people wouldn't hire them anymore. So being a consumer that's navigating and advocating and trying to make good decisions, I think looking, you want to find real world studies as much as possible, and you want to trust your own body. So, like with air purifiers or air scrubbers, which is what Jaspr is, I tell people like, feel free to buy Jaspr and a couple others if you haven't experienced the product before, because when you sleep with it for one night, it will be undeniable in how you sleep. But I would say the best is experiencing the thing itself. The second best is someone who you trust that's gone deep. And then the third, honestly, where I get a lot of information myself is podcasts. I find an in-depth conversation and hearing it from the founder, from the engineer, someone who's used it before, um, is the best way that I've been able to make purchasing decisions for my family.
You brought up sleep there, and this study you guys did where you sent out Jaspers for sleep data. Talk more about the specifics there and what you guys found.
Sure. So I will say this is a community study, an anecdotal study. So, no New England Journal of Medicine, no double blind, nothing like that. This was a community study. And so, yeah, what we did is we found 150 people who were not filtering their air, who were tracking their sleep, mostly with auras. It was basically almost all aura. We didn't want to have 10 different sleep trackers. Otherwise, that wouldn't have been like consistent. And 80% of the people who applied for the sleep study had auras. So it was basically an aura ring sleep study. And we gave them the Jaspers. And for the first week, it was Jasper off. weeks 2 and 3, Jaspr on. Week 4, Jaspr off. Because I'm like, maybe some of them were iffy, and like let's calibrate to the current season and not go off your historical data. Like let's go off the now. So the high level, and then I'll zoom in a little bit more about what we learned. But the average person, Jaspr on versus Jaspr off, slept 25 minutes more per night with 18% more sleep. 18% more deep sleep and slightly increased HRV scores and 5 minutes sleep latency, which means they fell asleep 5 minutes faster. Now, this average was heavily pulled up by really bad sleepers. It's not like people who slept 8.5 hours were sleeping 9 hours now. A little bit of that, but it was the people that were sleeping 4.5 hours that were now sleeping 6.5 hours that really pulled the average up in a meaningful way. um because it's not like Jasper is put an air purifier and all your problems are gone. The problem is most people aren't filtering their air, and indoor air is typically filled with mold, dust mites, pollen, bacteria, pollution, the rubber from the tires, glyphosate, all the stuff that life has in store for us, both the materials of our home, particulates, chemicals, etc. We're breathing that all night long. So when you can go from breathing in very polluted, toxic air to very clean air, and I call sleep healing time. So when your sleep fuel, your healing fuel, the only thing that keeps you alive all night long is air. When that is clean, your body heals itself quite beautifully. But when your body's dealing with mold spores and dust mites and allergens and off-gassing paint and some new furniture that's off-gassing and your cat litter and the dog, whatever they brought in, your body is playing defense and has a very hard time healing and recovering. So it's no surprise, clean up your water, clean up your food, clean up your air. Air is nice because it's so passive and it supports your sleep. Um, but yeah, that's the high level, and that's what we learned from the sleep study. So now, here's the coolest thing that was not expected at all. 30% of people, once again, this is rough. This is not a clinical trial. About 30% of people who snore when they put a Jaspr in their bedroom on fan speed 3 with the door closed stop snoring. Um, we only learned this because we kept getting reviews that's like, hey, my husband and I were sleep divorced. We weren't, he started to snore. It got worse and worse. I tried earplugs. I tried everything. Eventually, I tapped out. I moved to the other room. Since we got the Jasper, he stopped snoring. We're sharing a bed again together. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm like, wow, I did not see that one coming, because most people think about snoring as an airway issue, genetics, weight, etc., posture. But like for a lot of people, it's the air itself, it's the fuel. So that's the sleep snoring air quality Jasper situation.
When you talked about the Jaspr, you described it as an air scrubber
I did.
versus how I opened an air purifier. Talk about how you differentiate there.
Yeah. So if you think about a pickup truck and a Honda Civic or even a golf cart, but let's just think about a small coupe and a large SUV. They're both vehicles, they're both cars, they're both automobiles. They both have four wheels and roofs and windows and engines and doors and seat warmers. They're conceptually the same thing. But the SUV, for example, is designed to take more people, to take more stuff, to be safer, maybe to be more stylish. The SUVs only came into market in the late 80s, early 90s. And what they realized is these military vehicles converted to civilian family use was really effective. And a lot of moms didn't want to drive ugly minivans. So they realized that, hey, we can actually have something that's more effective and more heavy duty and aesthetic. And now over 50% of cars sold in America are SUVs. So the difference between a scrubber, which is a scrubber, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, my background was in wildfire restoration, flood, hurricane cleanup, mold removal. So, for the Canadians out there, Fort McMurray, Alberta was a huge wildfire in 2016. In 2013, there was the biggest flood in 100 years was Calgary in 2013. The biggest fire in 100 years in Canada was Fort McMurray, Alberta, 2016. plus British Columbia wildfires, California wildfires, Hurricane Harvey was in Houston. So I would go to big disaster zones and make a sick home a healthy home so a family could come back. And we would use these machines called, how would we clean up a moldy building or a smoke riddled building? We'd clean all the surfaces, everything physical, and we would also clean the air. And the air was just as much a big part of making a building healthy and safe again. And we would use machines called air scrubbers. And then as a mold restoration guy, I would compare that scrubber to these little air purifiers. And I'm like, wow, this is not apples to apples. A scrubber is like 10 times the effectiveness of an air purifier. If you think about it, like a kettle and a water heater and a pool heater are the same. The only thing that's different is how much water they heat. A space heater and a furnace are the same. They heat air. What's different is the volume and the capacity in which they do that. A air scrubber and an air purifier, a purifier is like what it sounds like. It's designed to incrementally clean your air, which is why they could say it covers 1,000 square feet or it covers 1,500 square feet, because the goal is really only to clean all the air by a little bit. So it's incrementally cleaning your air. An air scrubber has a higher standard of performance. It's trying to scrub the air to 80, 90, 95, 97% cleaner. So an air purifier and an air scrubber are fundamentally the same thing. The scrubber's difference is its industrial, its size, its scope, its commercial grade. It's a larger, heavy duty machine. And Jaspr in particular, we said, hey, how do we make something that's an air scrubber? The problem with most air scrubbers is they're very loud and they're very ugly. They're very industrial looking. They're so amazing for construction, flood, fires, etc. Totally impractical for everyday home use. You would never want to run that in your home. So I'm like, how do we? It's like you had this big military trucks and these cars. So Jasper is kind of like the SUV. We wanted to make something that has the effectiveness that's high performance, but it looks good and it's quiet. So that is a scrubber versus air purifier. Great question. Thank you for asking.
The air purifiers currently on the market, in your opinion, are any of them any good?
They're fine, actually. The problem is not the machine, it's how it's marketed. So, for example, and a really important thing that I tell everyone, Jasper was made by like a mold man like me who had a wife that appreciates interior design and aesthetic, and we both really like high quality service. We like we like a bullshit free experience, whether that's from a restaurant or from a school or from a product. We like dealing with companies who make it nice to work with. So, the problem I have with most air purifiers is, I don't like 1 year warranties because your warranty should last match your life expectancy. And it's how they're marketed. If they were marketing, and like for example, most little air purifiers you see, the 99, 199 ones are a little bit too small, but there's some that are 299, 399. And if you put them in like a dorm or in a very small kid's bedroom on full speed all the time, they'll do a pretty solid job. Um, However, you can also make a really good DIY air purifier, or even an air scrubber, I may say. The downside is, it won't be pretty. It'll be a little bit loud. It might not have smart sensors on it and things like that, but it will clean the air very well. So if someone's just concerned about mold in their kid's bedroom or wildfire smoke, and they just want something that's truly effective for $100, $150, 3, 4 hours at a Home Depot, you can make a really good DIY air purifier that works way better than the little plastic things you're going to find in the stores. So most of them, if they're on a high fan speed, um, in a small space, they can get the job done. A lot of them, though, it's the filter. The filter life expectancy is not great. So after 2 or 3 months, they're gone. But some brands that are pretty solid, Coays aren't bad. Blue Air is not bad. Allen Air is not bad. Like there's some brands that are okay, but I find most people would be much better off with a DIY machine, $150. Have a fun activity with your kids for a little bit, or getting something a little bit more premium. Because when you're talking about your air, the thing that the average adult's taking 15 to 20,000 breaths per day, 17,000. You're drinking 2 liters of water in a day, and you're breathing 17,000 liters of air. So I think $1,000 air purifier very expensive, but $2,500 for a whole home clean air system where you're breathing 20 times cleaner air all the time passively, cheaper than supplements, no willpower required to help you sleep better and get more energy. If it does the things that we promise it does, it's actually a very cheap health investment. If it doesn't work, then it's very expensive. But the problem is not usually how the machines operate. It's how it's the over promising of how they work.
Somebody brand new to this, maybe they're eating a healthy diet, they're exercising, they're filtering their water like you talked about, but they haven't addressed the air piece. What's the first step? Is testing important? Can we all assume that the modern environment is toxic and we should go right to filtration? How do we get started?
Good question. So, and it's one of my big missions. I'm not going to be done talking about air for a very long time because we got a lot to talk about. And you go to the naturopath or a functional medicine doctor, a lot of people are sick and tired of they go to the doctor and the doctor just they have 5 minutes with you and they write you a prescription and they give you pills. And a lot of people are kind of getting tired of that way and they're not getting better. And they do the allergen testing and they stop eating that food and they're still not feeling well. So then they kind of move towards naturopathy or functional medicine and, addressing the root cause. And it's becoming very similar to doctors. You go in there, they ask you hundreds of questions in lots of forms, and a lot of them are forgetting to ask the very basic question: what's up with your air and your water? And the ultimate 80/20 is an air scrubber in your bedroom and a water filter for your drinking water. So yeah, you can go deep. You think about diet and nutrition. You could go deep down the rabbit hole. Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to build muscle? Optimizing it and when you eat and blah blah blah. But like a very very simple diet is like you know less sugar, less bread, don't no fried food, and don't eat after dinner. Like these are like some basic fundamentals that will get you very far before you're getting into like really getting into your diet. Like just stop eating after dinner. This is everybody does good. Stop drinking pop. There's a few soda for the Americans here. Um, there's a few simple moves with water. The deep rabbit hole is like, the microplastics, showering water, bathing water, blah blah blah. A simple solution: let's deal with your drinking water. So whether that's a Berkey or a reverse osmosis system or ordering glass bottles of water to your home. But like in terms of, I think if you can just dial in your drinking water and your sleeping air. So, get a good water filter and a good water bottle and get an air scrubber for your bedroom. Forget about the clean air everywhere in your office and in your gym and in your living room. The beginning of the rabbit hole begins with your sleeping air and your drinking water. The most toxins, because you're pretty much guaranteed to spend a third of your life in your bedroom, and that's the time when you heal and recover. And you're drinking a couple liters of water, or a gallon of water a day. So I think the ultimate 80/20 of health and reducing your toxic load and burden is cleaning up your drinking water and your sleeping air.
So it didn't sound like it, but would you ever consider testing before somebody moves into filtration of the air?
So I was in the air testing business for, when I was doing disasters and stuff. In between disasters, I was also consulting people on air and water and environmental stuff. People who moved into new homes, people who were concerned about mold, asbestos, radon, all the stuff. And I was getting kind of sad and frustrated after a bunch of years because basically nobody ever had good water or good air. And they would pay, 500, 1,000, 1,500, $2,000 to test their water and test their air. And it's like, if you're getting your water from a well, you pretty much always have a bacteria problem. So pretty much well waters always have UV filter and a sediment filter. Same with, lake water and cottage country. City water is pretty much always incredibly high on chlorine and fluoride and a lot of other chemicals. So I've never tested city water before. I'm like, damn, that's great water. So just getting the water filter is pretty obvious. With air, It's also pretty obvious. Like we test, so in Austin, Texas, we deliver everyone who orders the Jasper, we deliver it and we test their air for free while we're there. The average home's air is whether it's pollen, mold, dust, the paint fumes, your indoor air is pretty bad, because the greatest air filter in the world is nature, sun, wind, rain, trees. And our homes are built so tight that the nature doesn't come inside. And the flowing river is pretty clean. The stagnant pond is where we get mold and sorry, algae and bacteria. And it's sick, smelly, stagnant water. Mosquitoes, air is the same. Outside, you got the wind. That's kind of like the river. Our homes are built so tight. That's kind of like the pond. That's why it smells stuffy and stale and toxic. So, if someone's really sick and they're looking for a specific thing like mold, you could test, but the table stakes, in my opinion, is filtering your air and filtering your water because it's never good.
Okay, given the fact that it's never good and we want to get a filter in the home, on top of that, what are the biggest culprits in the house, even with a filter, things
Yeah.
we want to be mindful of to bring that burden down?
Yeah, and so the biggest, like, well, starting at the front door, don't wear shoes inside is like a no-brainer. I grew up in Canada. I'm in Austin now. Nobody in Canada really wore shoes inside. I mean, some people had like indoor shoes, but people wouldn't just come into your home and like wear their shoes inside. I think because of the winter, that would be like such a mess. Here in Texas, people just come into your home with their shoes and boots. They don't think twice about it. So no shoes indoors. 95% of shoes have fecal matter on them. And I guarantee you it's just as high for glyphosate and other chemicals. So shoes should not go inside. Table stakes. Next thing, um, when you're cooking, if you can open your windows, that would be a very good idea. But using your range hood or your basically the vent above your stove, most people's don't work very good. So you should test yours out. What I mean by this is take a tissue, and a lot of them have like that microwave style vent. They almost never work. So here's how you test: you take a paper towel or a Kleenex, hold it up, turn on that fan, and make sure it pulls it from your hand and it holds it there. And then see where it vents. Sometimes it just vents into the cabinet right above. That needs to vent outside your house. That's what the vent is for, to exhaust from the home. Also, same with the bathrooms. When you shower, you ideally want to run your bathroom fan for about 2 hours after a shower. Why? Think about this. Your home is pretty tight. You shower, that's a lot of moisture and humidity. And just think about how much water a towel can soak up. There's a lot of water that accumulates in the towel in the bottom of the shower. And if you're not venting it out, then that water is just increasing the humidity too much in your home. And that creates to the mold count and the mold spores in your home. So same thing, tissue test, turn on your bathroom fan, make sure it pulls it, make sure it vents outside. Um, those are big ones. And then run your bathroom fan for a couple hours after you shower. An easy hack for that one is just getting a timer. Like you can get like the dimmer switch timer type of combo where it has the 1 hour or the 2 hour timer. So when you're ready to take a shower, and turn that fan on before your shower. People think those bathroom fans are for poop smells. They're not. They're for the shower. If you don't have a fan, you should by code typically have a window, but you want all that humidity from the shower going outside and not staying inside. Also being mindful of, so cooking is the number one thing that pollutes in a home. So that's why you want to be venting out all of the aerosols in the exhaust. And then be mindful of your cleaning products. So when people do have a Jaspr on smart mode, they notice it's going red all the time. If they're cooking inside without ventilation, if they're using toxic cleaning products, candles, it goes off. So you want to be mindful, like all the really heavily scented products, the Cloroxes, the Windexes, the Lysols, you want to look for more natural cleaning products. And this is just a good way to keep the toxic burden and the sources down in your home. If you're painting, look for a low VOC paint. If you're setting up a baby's nursery, paint 4 or 5 months before baby's born. Get the new furniture in ASAP and open up the windows so it can exhaust and off gas. Off gassing is, think about that new car smell. It doesn't last forever, but that new car smell is not a natural smell. You don't want to be breathing that smell in. Um, those are the big ones.
Any tips for somebody who just got a new car and they're dealing with that smell to help bring it down at least?
Sure. Couple ideas. If you have if it's a nice day, I mean, even if it's a cold day, if it's not raining, if the weather, basically, if it's not rainy, I would really encourage opening doors and windows when you're not driving it, just to let it breathe. I would encourage, um, when you're driving, one of the best ways to drive, if you have a sunroof and you could open it or do that like little vent crack, that vent crack is incredible. That's one of the best ways to exhaust air out of your car. It doesn't get too loud. Like I pretty much always am, if I'm in a car, I always have that vent open. If you're in a pickup truck, the vent and the back window is a great combo, just both cracked. And if you don't have that, cracking two windows in your car like an inch is good for that cross ventilation. But basically, when you're in the car, increase the airflow. And when you're not in the car, giving it some time to off gas would be good too.
Okay, obviously we can use that tip about cracking the windows or the sunroof in general beyond new cars. But let's expand into cars in general. Are there any good air filtration systems? What are some tips for just improving the air as we're driving about?
Another good question, man. So I'll go a few ways with this. The only cars that have amazing filters just out of the box is Teslas. Um, the filter in a Tesla is like 4 feet long. The filter in every other car is like teeny tiny. Tesla, I would call an air scrubber. So the filter is massive. The carbon, the HEPA, it's like serious heavy duty air filtration. Um, and I've tested it a lot. The carbon dioxides are good. The filtration is good. When you test it in even an LA wildfire situation, the air quality in the Teslas are great. So that's the only car I've seen that has great air filtration out of the box. For other cars, I buy cabin filters off of Amazon. There's a more also, it's shockingly easy to change your cabin filter. I'm like the least handy guy in the world. In mine, you just open the glove box. It takes a minute, and you swap out the air filter. Um, I get them for like I think for $20, I get like three of them, and they're carbon, so they're like a much better premium HEPA carbon type of filter. And I change mine like every month or two. And when I change it, it's a dramatic difference. The air conditioning and the heating works better because it's less blocked, and the air smells much fresher. So I think normally they're telling you to change it every like 6 months or a year. It's way too infrequent or not frequent enough. Changing it like monthly or bi-monthly is way better. Also, recirculate mode in cars. This is a big one. So, carbon dioxide is called CO2. The outdoor CO2 is 400-ish, 450 in that range. Indoor CO2 is usually about 600 to 800. People are breathing, there's less fresh air. At 1,000, that's when the brain fog starts kicking in. 1,500, 2,000, that's where you get serious fatigue. Think about office buildings, elevators, classrooms, church, synagogue, whatever. People are like, it's stuffy inside. I got to go outside and get a breath of fresh air. What you're really saying when you say it's stuffy inside, that's your translation for the carbon dioxide is too high. I usually carry a CO2 monitor with me, and I'm always the guy at a restaurant or at a party opening windows and doors and monitoring the CO2 in my car. CO2 normally is 600, 700. If I got that recirculate button on, it gets 2 or 3,000. So especially, if you're in Canada, it's cold, you're on a drive, you have that recirculate mode on, the heat's on, and you're getting tired. It's because the carbon dioxide is getting very high. You're like, I just need to open the door and get some cold air. No, no, you're purging the carbon dioxide. That's why you feel better when you crack a window in the car. So the only time I would recommend using that recirculate mode is if you're driving by like construction or smelly area or it's wildfire smoke. If you're using it to control the flow of the outside in, great. But generally, I would not recommend having that feature on because you're going to be suffocating yourself with too much CO2.
What about CO2 in the house? You mentioned cracking windows.
Well,
Are
I'll
there
share.
ways we can hack that? Say we're in a room where we don't have control of the windows or there are no windows.
Yeah.
Talk about what you use to monitor. You mentioned carrying a device.
Yeah.
And I want to go deeper in this. This is something I want to cover with you.
Yeah.
How we can go about hacking that and keep it at a level where we're going to feel better.
Yeah, man. So I think a CO2 monitor is great. I even though I wasn't a big proponent of getting an expert or a professional or paying a lot of money for testing. Also, if somebody wants to go and do their own water test, a ton of cities offer a free basic test, not a comprehensive test. Also, a lot of universities do it too. Like anywhere in Texas, you can send it to Texas A&M and it's like $10, and they test your water as a part of like the lab program there. So there are options for that. But back to the carbon dioxide. So my CO2 monitor sensor, I use a brand called the ARANET 4, ARANET 4. It's about $150 USD. Um, it's a good product. The battery lasts about 4 years. It's small. It's lightweight. The Inkbird is another one, but like I haven't seen a horrible one. Um, in the CO2 side, I use the AirNet 4. I like it. You can add it to an app on your phone, which provides historical data. If not, you just have it as a standalone unit, no required. Um, so indoor can be that 800. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was living in Kelowna, British Columbia in 2021, I was sleeping 10 hours a night and I was waking up exhausted. And I was measuring, I wasn't paying attention. I had my air monitor, but I wasn't really looking. And I looked at it. My CO2 was going from 700. Remember, 1,000 is where the brain fog starts. It was getting up to 3,500 at night. So me and my wife were sleeping 10 hours, waking up exhausted. And when I realized our CO2 was 3,500, I would crack the window, but sometimes it was too cold or the wildfire smoke was outside, so that was not a good option. And it's remarkable because what the solution ended up being was keeping so first of all, from a problem perspective, this was like life debilitating. And if it was just me or just my wife, it wasn't that bad. Also, I was mouth breathing at the time. I'm happy to say now I'm a great nose breather. So I'm producing less CO2 in general, but I was breathing heavy and our CO2 was up there. And you'd watch it climb throughout the night. Then in the morning, when we'd open the door, you'd watch it crash down. So I needed ventilation in our room. I kept the ensuite bathroom door open to the bedroom and I just left the bathroom fan on at night. And that was enough to keep it under 950. Like instantly, I was sleeping 8 hours a night instead of 10, waking up refreshed and feeling energized instead of exhausted. So I love stories like that because, first of all, it was a personal story and no purchase required. It was, a little bit of energy cost and a bathroom fan, no new purchases. It already existed and it was life changing. If someone doesn't have a bathroom fan, you can add a bathroom fan or a garage fan or an exhaust or a vent or a computer fan. It could just have vented into the regular home. In this case, our bathroom fan was venting outside through the attic. But like, what a cool little elegant solution. We just needed more ventilation. We just needed to dump the stale air out of the room so the new fresh air could retake its place.
I love that example, and I'm going to start using it because we have a bathroom connected to the main part of the house, but also to our bedroom with a fan that goes to the outside. So I'm going to keep that. I don't know where the CO2 is right now, but I'm
It's
going
worth
to
checking, man.
proactively do what you said there.
It's worth having a CO2 sensor. Like on airplanes, for example, it gets to 2,000, 2,300. Air is very clean on airplanes, but the carbon dioxide is very high from the recycled air. So, like, the same feeling you get where you're tired on a long drive in a car or in an office or in a conference, everybody sleeps on planes, even when it's like a 10 a.m. flight. You just literally had an 8 hour sleep and had a coffee and you're sleeping again. Duh. The CO2 is crazy. So, everybody pay attention to your first breath when you get off of a plane because you're going from a high CO2 environment to not. And you'll be okay. You can handle it for a few hours. You're resilient to it. But a lot of the jet lag and the feelings and the symptoms that people get is due to excessive CO2. But it's very empowering because, so it's sort of a little party trick for me. Sometimes friends like to put me on the spot. I'll have my CO2 sensor in the car, and they'll be like, "Yo, Mike knows what the CO2 is right now," and I'll guess. I'll be like, "It's between 900 and 1,000." Then I'll like pull it out. It'll be like 950. I could just tell. I could feel it in my lungs. It's the same way. I love doing this. If you're sitting with a few people outside, and you go, "Hey, everybody," no one. Let's say no one's checked the weather yet today. Everybody, guess, write down in your phone or on a piece of paper what temperature you think it is outside right now. Like I did this like last week. There was like four of us, and the average it was like 78, 79, 82, and 83 were the guesses, and like it was actually 81. It's like if you took the average of it, we nailed it. Nobody said 90 and nobody said 70 because you have amazing temperature sensors in your skin. Your body is this incredible instrument and it's attuned to your environment. The same way you smell garbage, you could smell poop, you could smell chemicals. You're like, ugh, I have to get out of that environment. You can taste like the ultimate way to know if your food is expired is smelling it. But we stopped. Humans have societally been outsourcing our trust. We use apps to track our steps, to track our sleep, to tell us if the food is expired, to tell us if the air is good, to say what's the temperature and then tell you if it's warm or cold. Just go outside and feel it. Do you feel warm or do you feel cold? You know this stuff. So, with carbon dioxide, because I look at CO2 regularly, I can feel it just like I can feel temperature. Because I look at relative humidity often, I can feel like today feels like a 67, 70% humidity. Maybe a little higher now than in the morning. But and if I'm checking daily, I get really calibrated to it. It's like if you're in the rainforest versus the dry sauna or the desert, you know what dry feels like. Your skin knows, your throat knows. But we stopped trusting. Same, I know a guy. Well, I heard a good story. A guy put on a little vibration thing attached to a compass, so it would buzz a different pulse, north, east, southwest. And within a few weeks, he could take it off and know north, east, southwest. Just like many animals have internal compasses for migration. We do too. We just outsourced it to the GPS. We outsource our memory to the phone, to the calendar, and all that stuff. But it's amazing. Like with mold testing, I was here. A guy named Ryan Blazer from Test My Home was staying with me last night. We're talking about testing, and I'm like, man, I said, if you're certifying testers, what's really important is that you go into homes with them with no equipment, because anyone who's tested enough homes, you walk in immediately, high CO2, high mold, you pretty much know the species because you've calibrated your sensor. That musty, moldy smell, if you learn to trust that, that is the ultimate mold detection system. The labs pale in comparison to the human. So it's really fun with CO2 and particulate. When you start to look and pay attention, you become the testing equipment, and I think that's just awesome.
With CO2, I'm particularly interested right now because recently I've thought more about this, and I'm in an office right now, no windows. I have the door closed when I'm recording. It's a small room. I can only imagine as I'm doing a 2-hour interview, that CO2 going up. And the only thing I could think to do to this point is blow a fan under the door. And when I think of it, I crack a window in the room adjacent. So any other ideas for me in this particular situation with the office I'm recording in and for people in similar situations?
Number one, producer Keith, will you make sure we send Jesse and Aaron at 4 after the podcast? Done. So first of all, we are sending you the CO2 sensor that I use um, via Amazon to your home, because I think it would be really cool for you to have that awareness, and then we can help you troubleshoot that in a very uninvasive way. Because it's a big deal. I was at a podcast with a guy named Jordan Harbinger last week, and he records in there all the time, voiceovers, podcasts, everything, and it's also sound insulated. It's as tight as possible, and he gets exhausted in that room. I'm like, yeah, of course your CO2 is off the charts. So this this air awareness is very, very important. And what's really cool about it is so first of all, there will be a very reasonable solution to this problem. It might be just as small as getting a very small fan, almost like a computer fan, like a little bit bigger than that, like a 40 CFM fan, even if it's just blowing through the wall, but a silent fan, you don't want anything loud in your room, but a silent fan that's just blow exhausting out of that room, whether it's up or out, whether it's to an exterior or to an interior, uh, it's going to help a lot. So I'm excited to figure out with you what your CO2 situation is in there. It would actually be funny. Like I'm just imagining now in my mind's eye, like I'm seeing you on the screen. I'm imagining that this podcast started. You were probably like a 600. You're probably at like a 1200 now. Your brain function is slightly decreasing, and like I'm visualizing it on the screen, just slowly creeping up. I'm glad that you will have a CO2 monitor at home, and by increasing your air awareness in general, this is how we make significant change in the world, because whether it's carbon dioxide or synthetic fragrances that are used everywhere, whether it's Ubers, Airbnbs, restaurants, hotels, malls, casinos, restaurant businesses are spraying chemicals all over the place that are really bad for us. And people are just accepting of it and mostly oblivious to it. And secondhand smoke was a really important movement. It was great marketing, because until then, if you were smoking 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, whenever it was acceptable, if you would complain about somebody else smoking, you were the Karen, the complainer with your preferences, like telling someone to turn the music down. You were kind of the one ruining the fun. But then the science caught up a little bit. We realized, oh, wow, it's not just the one with the cigarette in their mouth that is giving themselves cancer and making themselves sick. It's anyone who's breathing in that smoke. And what that did, it angered people. By realizing secondhand smoke is a problem, all of a sudden it wasn't just your preference that they stop smoking, it's get your smoke out of my face. And through the anger, that created a movement where people stopped, first there was smoking sections, and then smoking gets banned altogether, which I would say was a great win for society. I don't like go to Europe and I'm like, I'm so glad everyone's smoking on patios. This is awesome. Um, and the awareness, first we needed the awareness, then we kind of needed some proof, and then a little bit of anger, and you get a movement and you get change. And now it feels pretty unfathomable to be in a public place and breathing cigarette smoke. And now I feel a similar movement, groundswell is here, with synthetic fragrances, carbon dioxide. A lot of buildings are just they're trying to increase profits. So what does that mean? They're trying to tighten up the building as much as possible, minimal fresh air, keep the hot air in the winter and the cool air in the summer. So they're optimizing for energy efficiencies. Nowadays, hotel windows, schools, offices, the windows almost never open anymore. That's just to save a little bit of money on energy, but they're tripping over dollars to save pennies. And same thing with like these hotels in Miami, they turn off the power, or in the Caribbean, they turn off the power when the guest is not in the room. They give you that little card to like put in the door to keep the power on. And then when the guest leaves, they turn off the heating and cooling, and they only turn it back on like right before the guest checks in. Horrible idea. Okay, you're saving a little bit of energy, but because of all that stagnant air and humidity, you now have a mold riddled hotel that likely has to be completely gutted and remediated. So, penny wise, pound foolish, very common here. So, the more people can become aware of the chemicals, the fragrances, the pollution, the carbon dioxide, and realize, oh, wow, that restaurant, that mall is making me sick. I'm not going to shop there anymore. I need to go to a mall with clean air that I can breathe safely and healthily, or I'm just not going to go there anymore. When the incentives shift and the businesses realize, oh, these chemical sprays are not the answer, because people are waking up to the impact it's having on them, I think that's when you can get a lot of change and get a movement. So yes, we make Jaspers, we have a great air scrubber, but really the mission that we're on here is just increasing air awareness all across the board.
So we've talked about humidity from the angle of in the bathroom when we shower, wanting to use the exhaust. You brought it up quickly just now. What about the other way around? Somebody who feels like their home is dry, the air is dry, they need to do something to boost that up. Is there ever value in doing that? And then how do we do that in a safe way?
Yes, nice one. So yeah, the too dry. There's if anyone Googles like relative humidity chart, so 45 to 55% relative humidity, moisture in the air, that's the sweet spot. When you get higher than 60%, that's when mold and microbial growth becomes an issue. When it's too dry, that's when you have viruses and bacteria. That's why people often get, like when people, growing up in Canada, people get sick in the winter. It's unclear exactly why that is. We spend way more time indoors. It's also a lot more dry. So it makes sense that you'd have flu season when it's dry because that's when bacteria and viruses are out there. That's when they're the biggest problem, and that's the environment in which they thrive. So yes, too dry is bad. It's bad for your skin, it's bad for your hair, it's bad for your throat. And a dry throat makes you really susceptible actually to being sick. You really want hydrated airways. So there's a big place for humidifiers. Now, you can use a humidifier in a bedroom to just locally deal with the humidity in your bedroom. The problem can be based on the water source that you're using. So, if you use tap water or even bottled water, we actually have a blog on our website. If you Google like humidifiers harmful or helpful, you'll see a blog about this. But if it's poor water quality, you're aerosolizing all of the bad water, and now you're breathing that in. So you're dealing with humidity, but you're putting all this other particulate into the air. With humidity, whole home humidifiers can also be really great. Most people get these $200-300 ones. The HVAC guy comes in, they attach it to a water line, they stick it in your furnace, and they call it a day. These suck. These are mold traps. If anybody has one at home, I guarantee you, open it right now, you'll see a disgusting amount of black mold because it's like literally there's like a wick and the water just drips on it and a little fan blows through it. It's a perfect environment for mold. So, what is important is there's actually steam humidifiers that you can get for your home. They are $1,500 or $2,000. They do cost more. But if someone truly has dry issues, a good steam humidifier basically distills the water and humidifies the air. But you want like a hot, steamy air as opposed to just like a cold, damp air in your HVAC system. So yeah, humidity is certainly a thing to keep an eye on. Also, the AirNet 4, the CO2 monitor that I'm going to send you, it also monitors humidity as well. So it just starts to calibrate your internal humidity sensors.
You mentioned HVAC there. Let's zoom
Ah,
in on what this is for people that don't know. And then what
okay.
do you think about people filtering their air by upgrading the filter in that? I know you see this differently than a lot of people.
Yeah, I do. So HVAC, it means heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. Notice the V says ventilating, but people kind of skip and ignore that part. Also, when we're saying HVAC, what I'm meaning is it's like your furnace and your air conditioner. It's the equipment that is in your home that heats and cools your home. So when I say HVAC, you can assume I'm saying furnace or air conditioner, the system that heats and cools your home. And the same way doctors aren't really taught about nutrition at all. So you go in there and they tell you what meds you require, but they don't tell you about the food you eat or the air you breathe or your sleep or your water. Wild. The HVAC industry is not taught about air quality either. So they're just thinking about heating and cooling, a little bit about humidity, but they're not thinking about the optimal air quality for your family to breathe, which is a huge oversight and a huge opportunity because if the HVAC industry was more air aware, we already have a whole industry of people that are trained on air systems that could really be championing this movement in a very profound way. And HVAC. So I'll call them furnace filters because that's typically what they're called. Your furnace comes with a filter. It's a fairly low grade filter. It's typically about a MERV 8, which is a efficiency value. So it's a cheaper filter. It's not filtering that much. It lets the air pass through it. You can upgrade them to MERV 10, 11, 12, 13, etc. So now it's filtering more stuff out of the air, but it's also decreasing the airflow. Another word for that is called a pressure drop. So now the motor is working hard. Your home is not heating or cooling very much. It's decreasing the airflow, which creates a whole new host of issues. Also, your furnace was designed to heat your home. It wasn't designed to be an air filtration system at all. So when you try to make it something that it's not, it doesn't, you could technically drum on a guitar, but a drum is better. So when you try to turn your HVAC system, your furnace, into a filter, you often choke it out, you void the warranty, you decrease its ability to heat as it's intended to. There's a reason that the furnace doesn't come with a better filter, and they don't market it as an air filter system. If they could, they would, but it's not what it's built for. So you can get standalone filtration systems that go into your furnace. Those exist. They're typically a few $1,000s for a good one. The problem with those is they're very loud, and your furnace is designed to turn on and off throughout the day to be efficient. So when it's off, the air filtration is not doing anything. So you need to turn your furnace fan on 24 hours a day, which is very loud, which uses quite a lot of power. It's very, like, it's just an annoying background noise. You don't want that thing on more than it needs to be. And yeah, you're voiding the warranty. It's just doing something that it's not intended to. If someone's building like a fully custom home and they want to build in all this healthy home air quality stuff, you totally can. But for anyone who's renting or has a regular home or a condo or an apartment, they're just not designed that way. Also, because it's in your HVAC system, it's equally distributing the cleaning power everywhere, where you want to focus the cleaning power. So if it's a school, you want the cleanest air in the classroom, not the hallway. If it's a home, you want the cleanest air in the bedroom, maybe your living room, maybe your office. When it's centralized into an HVAC system, you're cleaning the air in the crawl space and the hallway just as much as your baby's bedroom. So you're not focusing the airflow correctly. So furnaces generally are not good air cleaning machines. They're very good air warming machines.
So when it comes to the filter in the furnace, it's something we want to
Yeah.
change on a regular basis, along
Yeah.
with the filter in our Jaspr if we have one. Is it a good idea in between changing those to vacuum or clean the filters in some way? Or is that a waste of time?
It depends on the type of filter. If it has like a mesh pre-filter, which some furnace filters do, you could vacuum that to get like big chunks of hair off and dust and all that. But generally, no, because if you actually vacuum the filter, if you now look at that filter under a microscope, it's not, so imagine it's this fine mesh thing, right? And you vacuum it, you've just pulled apart the fibers a lot. So if you run a test on it, you've really damaged the filter on a microscopic level, and it's no longer going to perform that good. So to summarize, if there's a pre-filter before the filter, clean that all day with a bunch of dust on it, but actually vacuuming a filter itself is going to damage it quite a lot, and it's no longer going to be a great filter.
And I assume for Jaspr, same thing.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you always want to balance sustainability, cost, effectiveness, and simplicity. Like those things are not always, sometimes you can get it right where it's both, but sometimes you can't. So at Jaspr, we are optimizing for effectiveness and simplicity, and sustainability and cost come next. They're important. We think about them all the time, but effectiveness is the top priority, and simplicity. So our customers love that they just take the filter out, they change it in 20 seconds, they swap it out, they put it in, it's not another thing for them to maintain. We could have made it very complicated to change and either save them a little bit of money, um, give them, there's another filter called like an air doctor. They ask you to vacuum it every month, and there's 3 filters. So like it's just a chore. Um, and like there's too many, like we all live a very busy life these days. We're willing to pay for convenience. So Jaspr customers choose Jaspr for aesthetic, simplicity, performance. So it's one filter, you change it twice a year. That's it. You don't clean it, you don't vacuum it. That's who we're optimizing to help most.
All right, let's come back to HVAC. So we
Sure.
don't want to aim for the biggest MERV that we can find. You've explained why. What about maintenance on that and the tubing that runs through the house? How does somebody go about throughout a year taking care of their HVAC?
So I call the HVAC system the lungs of your home. And if your home can't breathe, then certainly the people and the pets inside the home can't breathe. And unfortunately, when most homes are built, there's a builder, developer, architect, whatever. Often they're building, a subdivision with 200 or 2,000 homes. And the equations that they're working on for the bank is how many homes can we build, how cheap, how fast, and what can we sell them for? There's very little time where they're sitting there. How do we build this home designed for human health and vitality and performance? Which is unfortunate because if done thoughtfully and intentionally, your home can breathe and your home can have clean air, but it's not one of the things on the priority list. And I'll come back to the HVAC, but it's really important to think about how we think about homes in general. You buy a home, you get a home inspection, five, six, seven, $800. They're looking for everything but environmental. They're not looking for mold. They're not looking for airflow. They're not looking for dust mites. They're looking for the foundation. They're even looking for silly stuff like, do plugs work? Like, it's looking strictly for stuff that's going to give you a cost. It's not looking for health things. It's not looking for airflow. It's not looking for water quality. It's not looking for mold or asbestos. What a shame. You spend $1 million on a home and $800 on an inspection, and you could buy a very toxic, moldy home. This is not cool, guys. So we need to increase the standard of our home inspections. This is sort of the first line of defense. And when you're thinking about it, so most homes, the HVAC was like the last thing they thought about. They do the square footage, big master bedroom, master bath, nice kitchen, some curb appeal, and then where can we shove the vents and the ductwork? Unfortunate, but we're working with the hands that were dealt. So important. Um, a couple things that you can do within your control. Also, it depends if you have air scrubbing or not. For me, because I filter my air, I have a MERV 8 and I change it once or twice a year, and those things never get dirty. If you're not scrubbing your air, you should probably be changing those filters every month because they're getting caked up with mold and dust and particulate and decreased airflow. So if you're not having air filtration separately, you should really be changing those filters quite a lot. And then your energy bill is going to come down and your air quality, your heating and cooling is going to work better. The other piece here is duct cleaning, especially after construction. If you've done like anytime you're doing a renovation or construction, you should always get your ducts clean when you're done. But if not, if you're not filtering your air, you should be getting your ducts cleaned annually for sure because they're going to get caked up and dusty and full. Just imagine it's like the arteries of your homes, it's the airways, and it's all filled up with dust and mold. And then that's just constantly recirculating in your home. So if you're not scrubbing your air, I'd be getting your ducts cleaned annually. If you are scrubbing your air, you could typically wait every 3 or 4 years because your whole HVAC system stays much, much cleaner.
And what about the furnace itself? Does that ever need to be fully taken apart and cleaned?
After a wildfire, it's a good idea. After a big construction project, it's a good idea. Typically, they don't get, if you open up your furnace, take off that front panel, if it's like caked in dust, it's a good idea to get it cleaned out. Some people's get dirty and dusty, and some people's don't. Um, just check. If it looks dirty, get it cleaned. For that, just totally go by your visual cue.
Okay, so far when it comes to air, we've talked about particulate, CO2, humidity, any other major variables in that realm. Now we want to make
VOCs.
sure okay, VOCs, and then if there's anything else,
Yeah.
bring those in.
VOCs, which is volatile organic compounds, which is a fancy way of saying chemicals. Um, this is that new car smell. This is the fragrances. This is the Glade plug-in. This is that new mattress you brought in that smells. This is that toxic smell off the paint. Odors typically. Formaldehyde, benzene, toluene. Formaldehyde's probably the most popular VOC. So this is that chemical off-gassing process. And when items are manufactured, furniture, artwork, painting, electronics, they get built in a factory, they get packaged up tight until they open up in your home. So they don't get that necessary off-gassing breathing period. Think about that gym floor, that rubbery smell. This is not a great smell for you. What you're smelling is the gym floor because it's not just there. You're breathing it in. It's constantly getting aerosolized, especially if it's in the sun and in the heat. You're working out on it. There's some friction. So VOC is sort of that other thing to contend with. But all the same things we talked about: opening windows, fresh air, air filtration. That's going to deal. This the good thing is the air filtration takes care of all of it. The same way your water filtration is going to take the same filter that's going to take care of it. It's going to take care of your chlorine, your fluoride, your bacteria. And a good air filter is going to take care of the mold spores, the bacteria, the dust mites, the particulate, the VOCs. So it can be just overly complicated, but it just comes down to we need to filter our air and our water.
The Jaspr specifically, how small of particles can that filter?
So pretty much every air filter is going to be almost the exact same here. Their companies are trying to compete on the filters. I very seldom have tested a filter that wasn't pretty good. They're pretty good. Um, it's not the area to compete in terms of efficiency. So we have two things here. The efficiency of a filter is how small of a particle size has it filtered down to. Then we have efficacy, how much airflow passes through it. So you could have a super efficient filter that captures everything, but it doesn't allow a lot of airflow. So efficiency times efficacy equals effectiveness. So here's a fun analogy. Would you rather have 99% of $1 or 95% of $5? And that's really how filtration works. So that 90, when you go from 99.9%, like almost all particle, I've never really seen a filter that's not getting 90 or 95% at 0.001 microns. When you talk about, when you hear brands talking about 0.03 and stuff like that, that's something called the MPPS, most penetratable particle size, meaning that actually the smaller sizes you filter better than the bigger sizes. You would think the smaller it is, the more they can get through, but when they're small enough and light enough, they get captured. So these perfect sizes that penetrate more. But for everyday home, if we're in like a vaccine factory or a nuclear factory and we're doing clean rooms and pathology and stuff like that, different game. But for dust and for mold and for things like that, you want airflow, you want efficacy, you want the air to be getting changed 5 times, not 1 or 2 times. And let's say a filter, if a filter is, let's just say something's 80/20 Pareto's principle. If it's 80/20, once you've done 2 cycles of 80/20, you're at 96.4. When you run it through another 80, you're well into the 99s. So when you hear about 99% or 99.9% with filters, that's per pass. So if you're changing the air several times an hour, you're filtering all the stuff. What matters is the air flow and how many times are you cycling the air contributes to effectiveness far more. So there's a reason. There's actually something above HEPA. It's called ULPA, ULPA, ultra. How come no one uses Alpa, even though it's 99.98? It's because it chokes the airflow too much. So if better filter equaled tighter filter, we would be talking about Alpa, not HEPA. Also, from a manufacturing process, it doesn't cost me any more to make a HEPA or an Alpa than a lower grade filter. It just means we weave it tighter together. So there's less little holes. There's more pleats in the filter. Um, the sweet spot is actually probably slightly below a HEPA, and we're working on a new filter that might come out in a few months that might actually be just below a HEPA. It's actually called the EPA, um, because we want to do not what the marketing competition is. We want to do what's the most effective. So, and which was hard because as a new company 5 years ago, everyone's evaluating you on specs. Now, when you got a lot of experience and a lot of trust behind us, we can really focus on doing just what's right and then communicating the truth and not being bogged down by the way other companies are doing things.
If these new filters make it to market, will they be compatible with the current hardware and the
Oh
current
yeah.
filters? Yeah.
Yeah, we're on our fifth Jaspr and our seventh filter. But you know what never changes? The size. So the newest filter fits the Jaspr from 5 years ago. We make one machine and we make one filter, and we will never deviate from that size and that compatibility.
What are your thoughts on AI? This is coming into our world quickly in a big way, breaking a lot of paradigms. When it comes to air quality, is this something you're looking at?
Yeah.
Can you talk about it?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to narrow on air or generally. I'll go
Yeah,
air.
air specifically.
So,
But branch out if you want.
air. No, I'll start. Air is a good one. So, we're going to be creating a weather app that will be coming out in 2026, a Jaspr weather app. And it's going to have weather and air quality deeply infused. And right now, when you're looking at the weather, they're usually using one or two monitoring stations to tell you what the weather is, which might be, dude, this is crazy. So I'm assuming most people are only listening and not watching us on YouTube. If you are watching us on YouTube, I'm sitting outside by a river right now. I'm outside. The weather 1 mile from here up the hill, it can be a bright sunny day here, and it can be cloudy and cool like a mile away. And anyone who lives in the mountains would know that effect. And like you, in a very small distance, the weather could be dramatically different, especially when you're dealing with big bodies of water and hills and mountains and stuff. So, also in an urban environment, the air quality could be radically different based on the way the factory's blowing or the restaurants. So, hyper local weather, even like pollen, they tell you the allergen level for a city in a day. It could be dramatically different from the east side of the city to the west side. And there's a lot of sensors and datas out there all over the place, but getting more hyper local. So, also being able to take 6 or 7 different air quality sources and look for common truths and then communicate that. But basically, so our weather app is going to be an optimistic weather app. Like the weather app is weather now is way too pessimistic. And everyone, all you're thinking about when someone says, how's the weather? What you're asking about is pretty much three things: temperature, cloudiness, and rain, yes or no. However, often it's a little bit cool. It might be a little bit rainy in the afternoon, but it might be the cleanest air day of the year. So, what a great day to go outside with your kids, go for a run, go for a workout, open your windows that day, let the air in. It's the cleanest air day in 3 weeks. And like 2 days ago here, it was this beautiful day, and the weather calls it partly cloudy. I'm like, that should be called mostly sunny. And this is the weatherman is a glass half empty kind of situation. So be looking at some of the air quality factors, but where the AI comes in is not just from a lot of hyper local data sourcing, but it'll be more of a conversational weather app. So it will also, when you download the app, it's going to ask you a little bit about you: family, kids, movement, exercise. Where are you? It's also only going to tell you the weather where you are today and tomorrow. You cannot check the weather all over the world. There'll be no forecast for next week, just today and tomorrow. Because when they try to distill the weather down to an icon, it's a horrible way of doing it. Like there's like a cloudy picture and some rain, and it's like perfect the whole day, and in the evening it rains for an hour. Who cares? So, in one or two sentences, conversationally, you can actually explain the weather way better. Like beautiful day, cool and rainy, starting 3 p.m., possible rainstorm in the evening. That is way better information. And I think the cool thing about AI is sometimes there's just a time and a place for words, where words are a better way to describe stuff than icons and pictures and graphs and charts. And then it will be able to be conversational. So if the weather tells you that, you'll be able to ask it, hey, the chance of rain. How about in my specific location? Will it miss me? And hey, update me. If it's going to rain here, give me a push notification 15 minutes before so I have a heads up. So, using AI with weather, we're going to have richer data, a simpler and more conversational experience. So, and then on top of that, it'll be a lot with allergens and wildfire kind of stuff where we just want to access a lot of data and simplify it for the actual use case. So there is my that's my main use case.
Very cool. As you talk about allergens there, I want to zoom back and talk about what somebody can do in the home right now for free. Say they're even ordering a Jaspr, but they want to start today to upgrade the air in the home. We've talked about opening the windows, but this is where allergens come in. How does somebody know whether or not it's a pro or a con to open the windows? And then other free things they can do. You mentioned taking the shoes off. You gave us that list early on, but other ways they can hack the air in the home. You mentioned ventilation again for the cooking, but other things you can add to that list for free people can do today.
Free things you can do today. So yes, we got the shoes, we got the rain shield, we got the bathroom fan, we got better cleaning products. Ideally, you're not burning incense and candles. If you are, look for like a beeswax candle with a wooden wick. When you exhaust your candles, don't just blow them out. Either extinguish them outside or put like a lid on the candle, because it's the blowing out candle phase that pollutes your air the most, that black smoke, because it's not combusting, it doesn't have the necessary heat. Um, Other ones would be, if you have, getting a HEPA vacuum is actually a really good investment. They used to be a couple grand, now they're like $500-600. HEPA vacuum, not the Dyson one. That's not a real HEPA vacuum. The best one is called the GD George Donald GD 930. That's the same vacuum I would use in restoration and mold remediation, smoke and flood cleanup. And this could either be your daily driver, or this is like your deep clean vacuum. You're busting this out weekly or monthly or quarterly to do the carpets, to do the stairs, because otherwise you're using a vacuum and most likely the tiny particles are just shooting out the other side. So a HEPA vacuum, I think, is a great investment. And in a residential use, that filter is going to last you like 3 years. You don't have to change it very often. So it's, your Dyson or your Roomba might be your daily driver, and this is like your heavy duty thing. If you have carpets that are like smaller rugs, shaking them out quarterly is another fantastic idea. That gets a lot of the particulate out. Don't put Amazon packages on your kitchen counter. Amazon packages have seen a lot of shit. Sometimes literally they are not clean. Don't put them on your kitchen counter. Be mindful of where you put your backpack. So if you have like a backpack or a purse, especially if it's porous, that goes on planes, trains, buses, coffee shop floors, etc. And then you go and put it on your couch or your bed. These are like porous sponges. So be mindful of where you're putting porous things. If you get a HEPA vacuum, good idea to also hit the couch once in a while. Couches and mattresses actually get really dirty. Especially, mattresses, at least we have sheets and we clean the sheets. Often couches don't have that. So, and like, I would say steam cleaning, but steam cleaning is very expensive. You need a third party company to come in. The HEPA vacuum, you buy it once. Now you kind of have the machine to do the job on your own.
Okay, what about windows? I mentioned that within
Oh yeah,
realm too.
allergens in windows.
And other things. Obviously, we need to be mindful as the neighbor having a campfire outside. There's going to be all different variables that people need to consider. But in general, pros and cons when it makes sense to open the windows versus not.
So this really depends, because if you're not scrubbing your air and you're just breathing your air straight up, opening your windows is almost always good, because even if it's a bit of a pollen day, where do you think the air in your home comes from anyway? It's coming from outside. Even on a generally, like, if I test someone's pillow or carpet for pollen, there's more pollen inside than outside. Because outside we have the rain, the wind, the trees, etc. So even if it's a high allergen day outside, it's a high allergen day inside too. Because if your home wasn't bringing in the outdoor air, you would be suffocating in there. Your home is not this like airtight container. So fresh air is almost always a good idea. If it's too hot, too cold, too rainy, too loud, if there's an acute situation like fire, like smoke, yeah, you probably want to have less. If you notice it's like a really bad allergy day, basically only in extreme situations would I not want to have some windows cracked. If you're scrubbing your air, different story. Now I want my doors and windows more tight, because as that pollen or that wildfire smoke or that pollution or that campfire comes in, I'm scrubbing my air and I'm turning my home into like a clean air sanctuary. So the more filtration you have, the more closing the windows is better, so you can be deep cleaning the air. But cracking your windows and having a balance of fresh air and air scrubbing is great too.
Okay, you mentioned candles. I think you mentioned the incense. What about
Yeah.
essential oils and people that are diffusing those? Often done in our world as a way to gain certain health benefits. Do you see that as being good or bad?
Yeah, it goes back to that fragrances thing. Also, like there's good oils and there's not good oils. Um, Generally, I'd rather get a diffuser that's actually diffusing the herb personally, more so than an extract. So, there's little bubblers that kind of bubble hot water over lemongrass or eucalyptus and things like that. When it does come to oils, I don't know all the brands, but there's very cheap, crappy oils that are mixed with a bunch of stuff you don't want. And there's very good, pure oils that are great. If someone is using oils and stuff like that, and that if you're using oils and diffusers and candles, I think you'd be out of your mind to not be scrubbing your air because you are polluting it. It does get trapped inside. Either open your windows, do it outside. But if you're doing it in a contained environment where it gets trapped inside, I think scrubbing is a non-negotiable. But it depends on the brand, it depends on the product, it depends on the space. Um, it's a little bit nuanced, really.
What about plants? You often hear there's
Plants.
different plants out there and different lists online. I know snake plant is often mentioned, peace lily. How effective are these at filtering the air? And if they are, how can they complement a device like the Jaspr?
So yeah, well, first of all, trees are plants. Our logo is a tree because trees are the ultimate air filtration system of this planet. So, trees being plants, incredible air filtration machines. The NASA study in the 70s or so got pretty popular, the NASA plant study, where they showed the effectiveness of removing particulates and VOCs and stuff in a closed setting. And no one has ever been able to replicate that study. I've put plants into small rooms and monitored the CO2 and the air quality, and I've never been able to get it to change at all. So, from my opinion, I've never seen replicatable evidence that they work. But I do think having plants inside can be great for just how you feel. There can be a freshness to it. So I do still believe that they can support your air quality. You have to be careful of plants that are too big because like to actually clean your air, you would need trees in your home, big ones. At that point, you're going to have humidity and pest issues. Like plants want to be outside. They're not asking to be trapped indoor in your artificial light in your inside environment. So often plants can behave unnaturally in an indoor environment, just like humans in an indoor environment. So plants, good, not replacements of filtering air. In No one's been able to replicate those big studies, but I do feel intuitively that snake plants and some other plants, especially similar to the essential oil, like when there's actually a live freshness and a fragrance to the plant, I think a lot of the benefit is coming from that. So I'd rather have plants than burning stuff, that's for sure.
Early in the conversation, you talked about how when it comes to filtering the air in the home, we want to look at volume versus square footage.
Yeah.
We're coming up on the end of the conversation now. Somebody that's going to buy a Jaspr, make the investment in their health, how do they go about assessing in a practical way how many to start with? And then maybe a second tier if they want to get more nuanced over time with their air quality.
So yeah, starting from the most basics, if air quality is the issue and budget is the significant constraint, from that place, I would really start at looking at a DIY air purifier in your bedroom. That's like step zero that no one really has an excuse not to be doing. You know, Either you're not aware or you don't care, and like now you've listened to the conversation, so you're aware. Now you just have to decide if you care or not. But that's step zero. Jasper, in particular, I made Jasper for myself as the mold man who wanted something that was going to be pretty for his family's use. Now, sometimes it's very expensive to be cheap. So we have some of the things that make us unique, and then how many should you get? I'll start with the how many should you get thing. Um, One in your bedroom is the ultimate. Just like I said, start with your drinking water, start with your sleeping air. So, one in your bedroom on fan speed 3, dark mode, is a beautiful, beautiful place to start because now you're going to be sleeping better, recovering better, better energy. So, that's going to be profound. And even though it's in your bedroom, it's going to be incrementally contributing to the whole home anyway, because your home is circulating air. Then, if it's a no brainer for you, you might look at putting it in your child's room. If you cook a lot, putting one in the main living area on smart mode that will automatically respond to things like cooking and cleaning is the next level. But one in your bedroom is like the great place to start. Now, one Jaspr is typically equivalent to like 5 or more small air purifiers. So if you look at it for like dollar per cleaning power, Jaspr is actually very efficiently and effectively priced. And we have a lifetime warranty. So you buy Jaspr once, you do change your filters twice a year, but we've bundled the lifetime warranty with the filter subscription. So, it's $199 twice a year. But if that Jaspr breaks, and eventually it will, 2 years, 3 years, 6 years later, we ship you a brand new one. You take the new one out of the box, you put the old one in the box. We give you a prepaid shipping label, and then we send UPS to your front door to pick it up. Because I hate when I would have a product, even with a great warranty, they want photos, they want videos, then they want me to like get a weird shaped box, an original receipt, go to FedEx, pay $100 to ship it. I'm like, why am I doing all this? Your product broke. So with Jaspr, we believe we run on the Mensch values system. So treat people the way you want to be treated. And if you're running a business or managing a business or you work in service, treat customers the way you want to be treated if you're a customer. Because it's way more effective to keep the customers you got than trying to constantly get new ones. And so that's why Jasper's made out of steel, no cheap plastic. It's like a commercial industrial grade machine that looks pretty. It has no Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi, no EMF, no apps. It's just designed to look good, be quiet, be effective. And it's important in a bedroom setting that you're using fan speed 3, ideally, because that's where the life-changing sleep happens. That's when the air is 20, 30, 40 times cleaner. If you really love silence, you can keep it on fan speed 1. I would really encourage you to try it because 91% of our customers prefer white noise or pink noise over silence when they sleep. Nature is not a quiet place unless you were living in a cave. Sleep in the forest, it's a loud place. So, and it drowns out all the backgrounds, kind of city noise and all that stuff. So, yeah, table stakes is one in your bedroom. That is the most obvious place to start. But as you're getting into a larger home, the best, if budget is not an issue, it's putting one in each bedroom where someone is sleeping, and then putting one somewhere in your living room to handle all your cooking and your cleaning.
So you mentioned there the smart mode being on setting 3 in the bedroom at night. There is
Yes,
also a turbo mode.
there
When do
is.
you recommend people use that?
That turbo mode was created for dentists and doctors during COVID, where when they were done seeing a patient, they could hit turbo and just they could walk out of the room. So it runs on full speed for 5 minutes and then it goes back down. Actually, now it's 15 minutes and then it goes back to smart mode. So, that's what the doctors, the dentists, the nurses, the hygienists, it made their life easier. Where that button is often used is if you have one in your home and you're walking out the front door, you just want to hit turbo and leave, then it is a good way to do a deep scrub. But when you come back home, it's like the timer on the bathroom fan. If you like turn it on and it will run high for a bit, turbo will do a deep scrub for 15 minutes and then automatically go back to smart mode. I honestly almost never use the feature. Where I've seen it used most is like in apartments and condos, smaller environments, and people sometimes hit it when they walk out the door.
What about cranking it to max instead of turbo when people head out the door? Would that be too intense if
That's
you're
great
gone
too.
for the whole day
No,
working? Or
no, let it rip. The higher it is, the cleaner the air. And when you go traveling, I would also recommend a high fan speed. That way you have the cleanest air possible when you come back home. The energy cost is very low and air doesn't sleep. So if you're on vacation, you come home, normally it's stuffy and stale in your home. Let those Jaspers scrub so you can come home to a lower dust environment.
and if you're somebody that's cranking it quite a bit, or you're in an environment where the air is more polluted, do you have to change the filter more frequently than every 6 months? No?
Nah, 6 months is great. We designed it where it's covering 99% of use cases. If you leave it there and you like renovate your house and you like do a huge construction project, you're gonna have to change it. If you're going through a massive wildfire smoke like LA last year, you might need to change it. But generally, 6 months is designed, whether you have pets or no pets, cook or don't cook, 6 months is good for 99% of use cases.
All right, Mike, we're going to end it there today. I want to say I love our Jaspers. I really enjoyed going deep with you today. I learned a lot. We're going to link up the discount for somebody that wants to make this investment in the show notes. We're going to link up.
We've upgraded it for you.
Okay. Tell me about it.
I saw it was, I read that it was $300, but this is launching just after Black Friday, and it's only fair that your listeners get the best possible price. And so it'll be $400 off, not $300 off,
Amazing. And how long is that good for?
till the end of the year.
Okay.
And then for perpetuity, it will be $200 off forever. So if it's not the right time, no problem. But it's a good time of the year to start your 2026 off. They call January 9th National Pizza Day because that's usually when you've already folded on all your New Year's resolutions and you just get some pizza. The nice thing about clean air and clean water, it takes no willpower. It's an investment in money, but not time. You plug in Purify, you're just breathing clean air every day, and you let the benefits compound. So starting 2026 off with clean air and clean water. So yeah, $400 off. I'm not sure about the codes and all that, but it'll be good till the end of the calendar year. So if at the very least, I hope people learn something. Crack your windows, leave your shoes outside, make a DIY one. But forever, anyone who feels called by trying Jaspr, this is the lowest price it will ever be. It never goes lower. I promise you that. And also, thanks for asking great questions. I really appreciate it. Keith's sitting here and he was like, when we took a break for a minute, he's like, man, that was a lot of fresh stuff. So thank you very much for helping go deeper. I really appreciate it. I very seldom do this, but I'm going to be sharing this entire episode with our entire mailing list.
Oh, well, I thank you for all of that. We're going to link up the social media, the discount, the website. Really enjoyed this. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
What's really crazy about this is you could have a mold problem and have no idea. If we have mold issues in our home that's impacting our air quality, that's impacting our health, I would want to know about that.